The Forgotten Asylum. In the town of Moorfield, a place most dared not mention, stood an abandoned asylum at the end of a road swallowed by the forest. The asylum, obscured by trees and crumbling walls, had long been forgotten by most, but legends of horror still whispered through the shadows. For decades, rumors spread about what lurked within, wandering spirits, strange echoes, and an eerie sense of dread that hung in the air like a fog. One Halloween, 3 teenagers, Eva, Mark, and Leo, decided to investigate, drawn by the allure of danger and mystery. As they entered the asylum, a thick, damp smell of mildew clung to their clothes. Dim flashlights barely cut through the oppressive darkness, illuminating peeling wallpaper and rusted metal doors. Each step seemed to echo louder than the last, reverberating through the empty hallways. The graffiti-covered walls seemed to pulse, as if hiding secrets from the living. They whispered stories of people who had gone mad, isolated from the outside world, left alone with their haunting fears. The 3 friends tried to laugh off their discomfort, but their voices sounded hollow. Deeper inside, a cold wind swept through the hall, though no windows were open. Mark felt something brush against his arm, though when he turned, there was nothing. Eva started to shiver uncontrollably, her breath misting in the eerie chill. Leo tried to reassure them, but his voice trembled, betraying his own rising panic. They continued walking, each creak and groan from the building amplifying their fear. At the heart of the asylum, they stumbled upon an ancient operating room where the ghostly outlines of rusted medical tools cast twisted shadows on the walls. Eva let out a scream when she saw an old, bloody handprint on one of the tables, as fresh as if someone had just pressed their palm there. They tried to flee, but the hallway seemed to twist and turn, transforming into a maze of endless corridors. Panic surged, and the walls seemed to close in, making the air thick and suffocating. In their haste, they found themselves in the children's ward, where broken toys and faded drawings scattered the floor. The drawings depicted children with hollow eyes and sharp teeth, reaching out from the darkness. Leo swore he saw movement from the corner of his eye, a doll rocking back and forth on its own. As he looked closer, its head slowly turned to face him, its cracked face smiling unnaturally wide. They ran, but each turn seemed to lead them deeper into the asylum's secrets. Then they heard a whisper, soft, almost pleading. "Help us," it said, from nowhere and everywhere. Shadows flickered, revealing pale, ghostly faces staring back at them, eyes wide with anguish. Each face seemed to beg, yet accuse, as if the teens were somehow to blame. The faces grew closer, closing in on them, the faint sound of sobs filling the air. Just as the terror became unbearable, they burst through a side door and stumbled outside. They glanced back, only to see the asylum's windows glowing with a ghostly light. The building stood silent and still, yet the sound of soft whispers continued to echo around them. They would never speak of that night, nor would they dare to return, for some places are better left undisturbed. The asylum's secrets were buried in shadows, and some souls never found rest. As the teenagers stood outside the asylum, the icy chill of the wind made their skin crawl, yet they couldn't look away from the ghastly building. It loomed there, silent but somehow alive, as though it were waiting for them to make a mistake, to dare come closer once again. Eva clenched her flashlight tighter, heart racing as the whispered pleas continued to drift through the air, so soft they almost seemed imagined. But each whisper sounded like a child calling for help, like someone lost, just out of reach, deep within the darkness. Mark's breath shuddered as he finally tore his eyes away. We have to leave now," he stammered, pulling at Eva and Leo. But something tugged at Leo's mind, something insistent. He couldn't shake the feeling that they'd seen more than shadows in there, that the figures and whispers were real. He'd heard stories that the asylum was closed after a tragedy, but there was no mention of what happened to those who were kept inside. It was as though their stories were erased along with the building's past. Even as they turned to leave, Eva felt an invisible weight pulling her back. She could almost feel a faint tug on her jacket, as if a hand were trying to hold her in place. The sensation was so real that she gasped, spinning around, only to find nothing there but empty darkness. She hesitated, her breath catching, but Leo gently pulled her along, his face as pale as hers. As they walked away, she glanced back, and for a brief moment she thought she saw a child's face, pressed against one of the broken windows, watching them leave. Once they made it back to the edge of the forest, the silence of the asylum settled into a strange, haunting quiet. The whispers ceased, but each of them still felt an uncomfortable prickle at the back of their minds, as though someone were still watching them from the shadows. They agreed, unspoken, to never talk about what they'd seen, fearing that even mentioning it would invite those entities to follow them home. That night, each of them struggled to sleep, haunted by nightmares of twisted faces and desperate whispers. Eva dreamt of the children's ward, of pale faces peeking out from behind the walls, tiny hands reaching for her, their fingers cold as ice. Mark dreamed of endless halls, running but getting nowhere, trapped in the asylum's labyrinthine corridors forever. And Leo, he awoke in a cold sweat, the memory of that rocking doll seared into his mind, a memory too vivid to ignore. Days passed, and strange occurrences began to haunt them. Eva would catch glimpses of figures in mirrors, just barely out of sight. Mark swore he heard whispers at night, echoing in the darkness of his room, and Leo's nightmares grew worse, to the point where he feared sleep altogether. One evening, he awoke to the faint sound of a rocking chair creaking, though there was no chair in his room. The three friends became shadows of themselves, haunted and hollow, each carrying the invisible weight of something unspoken. Desperate to find peace, they agreed to meet one last time to try and break whatever curse the asylum had cast upon them. They gathered in the town library, scouring old newspapers and archives, looking for any hint of what had happened in that place. After hours of searching, Eva stumbled upon a weathered article from decades ago. It told of a fire that had swept through the asylum, leaving dozens dead, most of them children. There were rumors that the staff had abandoned them, locking the doors to keep the chaos contained. Those who perished had never been properly buried, their souls trapped within the ruins. The more they read, the colder the room seemed to grow. They discovered that the asylum's director had been accused of cruel practices, of experiments that left patients mentally broken. Those who had died had been left to haunt the halls, spirits that still wandered, searching for release. They realized with horror that the souls they had encountered were those of the forsaken, left behind to relive their final moments in an endless loop of torment. That night, the three friends returned to the asylum, not as trespassers but as mourners. They lit candles and whispered words of peace, hoping to bring some comfort to the souls within. As they moved through the asylum, the air seemed lighter, the shadows softer. For a brief moment they thought they saw faint figures, children, doctors, patients, smiling at them through the haze. The whispers faded into silence, and the suffocating weight lifted. Leaving the candles flickering in the darkness, the friends departed, feeling a sense of closure but knowing they would never forget. From then on, no one else reported strange sightings at the asylum. But on stormy nights, the faint glow of candlelight could still be seen in the windows, a quiet reminder of the spirits who had finally found peace.